Um, all right, good morning, everyone. We've talked a little bit about all kinds of stuff, but today I want to specifically talk about synthesis a little bit because it's a topic that is seldom touched on. And I'm going to be using, basically all synthesizers work the same. So they have an oscillator, which is something that creates noise, either a sawtooth or a pulse or a sine wave. I'll get into that. And then you take something away from that, from the frequency spectrum that happens. And then you shape the way the sound goes over time, so to speak. So how quickly it gets loud, how quickly it gets soft. We touched a little bit on that on the sampler thing, but we'll go into it now. So I've chosen this synthesizer called Zebra because you can very clearly see how stuff works on this one, and it's not hidden behind, even though it's massively powerful and has incredible stuff, you can very clearly see what's going on. So I've loaded up just a sawtooth waveform. Sawtooth because it looks like a sawtooth. It's usually like that's sort of the basis of what string instruments are producing, basically. That's what happens when you string an instrument. It's this waveform, except there are many harmonics on it, and there's all kinds of complex stuff that you can't really do, well, on a synthesizer. But so this is what just a sawtooth sounds like. Incredibly boring. If I go down all the way to the lowest note, so you can sort of hear what's happening, right? So that's just a sawtooth. But even now, I'm getting ideas that you can do, and that's another thing with synthesizer. I'm jumping way ahead, but using stuff at the edge of sort of what it does gives you many ideas that are sort of crazy. Like, taking that lowest note, you're not really having a note, it's a rhythm, actually, which, you all know the relationship between impulses, and when you speed them up and they get really fast, then it turns into a note and into a pitch. Then you pitch it up, it gets higher, higher, higher. And then eventually, if you speed it up more, it becomes light. And not quite, because I know light is electromagnetic. But it's sort of the same relationship. Also in light, you have an octave that we can see, and frequencies are related in octaves. All right, so, but that's besides the point. So we just have a very boring sawtooth waveform. Now, if we want to just hear what a sine wave looks like, sounds like, it's much more precise. So the sine wave, the sawtooth already, and I'm sorry that I don't have an oscilloscope available because you could see in the frequency what it does up there. Actually, I can do a basic one with the meter here. Well, it's not an oscillator, but it's at least a spectrum analyzer. So you can see there's very little going on. There's just basically the fundamental, and then there's one harmonic, which kind of, in a way, shouldn't be there, but in another way, it's unavoidable because of the physics of it. Because also once it goes out of the speakers, in real life, the harmonics will happen anyway, because stuff reflects and it adds, and it's so, just a pure one frequency sine wave is very tough to get. And let me go back to the sawtooth just to show what that looks like on the spectrum analyzer. So you see it has many more high frequencies going on. So those are the two basic waveforms. Plus there's a third one, which is a pulse, which, and I'm not a synthesizer historian, but I could imagine that the pulse wave was actually the first one that they used for synthesis, because it's easy to do in electronics. You just turn on the signal and you turn off the signal. So and that's basically a pulse wave. So that looks sounds like this, and it looks very similar to the sawtooth. But if I go back to the sawtooth, you know, they do sound different. And then, of course, with the pulse, there's a, but I'll get into that in a moment because I have to set it up differently to show it. The shorter this part is, let me show it here so the stream can also see it. So, oh no, they see me pointing at the screen. Yeah, that's right. I have to get used to that. The shorter that is, the more squeezed it will sound, and I'll do it in a moment. But so that's the basic thing. Let's stick with the and then once you have this one frequency going, what you usually do is take away stuff and change the way it works over time. So now it's just on, off, on, off. And this is done by a thing called envelope, an enveloper. And Tamo just made me aware of that, because we all say envelope, which is sort of for a letter, but that's not what it is. It envelops the sound, so it shapes the way the sound goes over time. So I'll probably just say envelope again because I'm so used to it, but it's really yes, everybody says it that way, but he's right. It should be envelope, and and that's another thing why I use Zebra, because you can now see the envelope and not just see the buttons, but you can see it in time. So if I pray, you see the little line moving, right? So it goes on immediately. So if I move this over, now you can see it gets louder when I press it. If I do this much longer, I have to move all of them if I want to do that. Come on. So, you know, you can... So already you have something that's sort of usable already, because I mean the on and off is stupid. So that's what we call the attack time. So if that's short, it's like this. And then the next thing we call the release, which is sort of this part of the envelope. And then this will be the sustain, where it just sustains. So when I play it now, it will start very strong and then go down and then stay on this level that I'm on. And then it stays here until I let go. And then it goes through that last phase of the thing. So if I make that short again, it will just turn off after. Okay, so, and this works on any instrument you put up. This is not just Zebra, it's on, and it works with samplers, it works everywhere. That's basically how you shape the sound. And the next thing you do is you take away frequencies. So that's a filter. So you use a filter, and there are all kinds of filters, but the most commonly used is the high cut, the low pass. So that means it cuts the high frequencies and lets the low frequencies through. Sometimes it's called the reverse. Sometimes it's called a high pass, and it's a low pass, and it's a cutoff, and it's, you know, it's sort of, but it always does the same thing, and you just have to listen to it, and you know immediately what kind of filter it is. And then there are, of course, many, like the filter algorithm itself can have different characteristics. So the way it sounds by itself is different, and there are, like, you can spend months and years just listening through different filter architectures. And it comes from, even on the electronic side, the way they build it is different. There are ladder filters, and there are transistor filters, and there's all kinds of stuff. I don't know if it's called a transistor filter, but it's, you know, different Bauelemente. What's
it's by architecture. They are,
yeah.
If you compare it by how they are physically made, or what is the algorithm itself, usually we call them IIR filters, or the delay-based filter types.
Right.
Are the normal regular ones.
And they will have different characteristics and shape the sound of it. But basically what it does is it does the following. So now it's all the way open. So now I've taken out all the high frequencies, and you can see it here if I move these next to each other. I don't know why this thing keeps flipping. So if I open this again, so you see we have everything. You know, now it's so low, the filter is so low that you can't, we don't hear it anymore because it cuts off everything. Then all of these filters have something called a resonance, which emphasizes the point at which the filter, the frequency at which the filter filters at that moment. So I'm going to turn it up all the way almost, which, you know, it's going to not sound so great. And up there, you don't even hear it, but so that feeping sound, that's sort of the frequency the filter is at the moment. And that's just this resonance. So if I remove this, you know, it's sort of like it's not a feedback, but it sounds a little bit like a feedback. It emphasizes that one spot in the sound. And then of course, there's all kinds of stuff. So, but that's basically subtractive synthesis, which is the most common one. Now there are different types of synthesis. There's also additive synthesis. And you can also do this with Zebra. Let me set that up on a second oscillator here. No, not like this. You go spectral blend. So now what I see here is the actual spectrum. So now when I turn on the lowest, and that's part of the problem. Let me make this big because I just want to have the fundamental. If you just turn on the fundamental here, then it will be a sine wave, right? And then you add frequencies in this case. And these are so high, we can hardly hear them, especially on these speakers, and especially at my age. So you guys will hear more than me. But this is a different type of synthesis. So here you add frequencies and then later take it away again. The end result is kind of the same because, again, you will create a waveform by this that is being played because that's just the way speakers and our ears and everything works.
But it's
just
that you can draw, like it's really intuitive in that sense.
it is. And but you'll see what's more practical. It's... No, this is not included in Logic. I'll show you stuff that's in Logic included. I just wanted to show it here because visually you can see how it works, and on the other one you can't. And it's yes, you can buy this software because it's and you can use it on PC and with any DAW. It's available even on Linux, so you can use it anywhere. It's a third-party manufacturer that just creates synthesizers and effects, and you can use them anywhere in production. And to me, they're sort of the gold standard of digital synthesis. Like, it doesn't get better than this stuff. Well, the Zebra is getting a little old, but it's still doing everything right. But he has other emulations. He has Diva, which does analog emulation. I got to that in a moment. Again, you don't see the stuff. That's why I use this, because it's so visual and it makes it clear. Okay, so that was additive synthesis. Of course, you can do synthesis with a sampler, which is what we did yesterday, where you just take a sample and you use the sample as the waveform and then filter it and put it through. So and that is technically also synthesis in a way. It's just the basis is different. Okay, so now how do you get this more exciting? And this is all about sort of shaping your sound now, because as I said, you know, we have the envelope that sort of, and in this case, I mean, I'm not going to try to program a specific instrument now. I might load up patches that sound like it so we can analyze those. But I just want to get the basic concept. So if you want to create a bass now, we already kind of have it. Except if you say, oh, I don't want it to sustain, I want it to be short, you just change the envelope. And if you're like, oh, it's a bit thin, so then you can turn up this resonance here, but then you have to turn down the, you know, and you're already much closer. And I'm not doing much, so this is a little envelope, it's a filter, and that's it. If you want to get more creative, you can now change the key follow for the filter. So whatever key you press, it changes the frequency where the filter sits. And if you turn this up all the way, then it sits on the notes actually. So then, but then you also have to turn the filter down all the way. So now if you play a C here, the filter is also at this C frequency. So, you know, if you go lower, the filter will be lower. We cannot hear this anymore. And if I go higher, because if I didn't do this, and let's go back to where we can actually hear this, and I set this back to 0. Bad example, it was on already. So if I don't do that, then, and I go up the scale, well, it's probably too high, where we can hear it quicker. So if you go up the scale, your sound starts disappearing because it's being actually filtered. And if you follow with the key, it stays there. And this is probably for this sound too much. And it's also because of the resonance. You know, so your sound will stay open even though you do have it filtered, and you can use it across a bigger range. But on the bottom, it helps because you can emphasize the exact frequency. So it creates a totally different impression than without the resonance. It's unfair because I have to change both parameters all the time in order to hear it. But you get the idea. Is this creates its own oscillator in a way, if you turn up the resonance all the way. So that's one way that you can shape the sound. Then you can also, of course, add an envelope to the filter. So let's say this is sort of in the middle, and we want to hear the sound longer so that we have an actual sustain. And then I can set the filter to an envelope. So I'm going to take one of these regular envelopes that you will see in all kinds of synthesizers, and I will turn up the modulation. And you hear how it now does wing, wing. That means the filter is opening up with the attack. And if I do it slower, it does that. Or if I wanted to go the other way, I do a short decay, have the attack really short, and the sustain low, so that it starts high, goes low, and so you hear it immediately, right? And it also depends on where the filter sits. So if I do it here, all right, you have this kind of sound. If you turn up the resonance for this, you get sort of this. exactly. And the reason is, now let's slow down the decay. So that's what it's basically doing. And I can do it by hand, of course. Like, you know, it's basically just doing, it's just doing that for me. And so that's how to filter a sound. And that's where they get their sounds from. It's so simple, and it's one sawtooth, and that's it. Now then, people started to do, I mean, it used to be really expensive because you had to buy an oscillator, which was an actual device. And if you wanted to have two, you needed to buy another device so that you have two voices. Because this isn't possible with just one oscillator, because you can only play one note with it. On software, it's of course possible because resources are almost infinite. So you can do that. But you can also, even if you play just one note, you can sort of have several oscillators play that one note at the same time. So I'm going to change this from single to dual. Now it's two oscillators doing it, and you don't hear much, right? But when I start to turn up the detune, you will immediately hear it. Right? So that creates the effect where it turns down the pitch on one channel and up the pitch on the other one. And the more I add the detune, the worse that gets. Well, yeah. But so a lot of, like, you know, whatever synthesizers you come across, especially digital ones. In the analog world, this isn't possible this way, but the digital, they all do this. So you can always sort of make the sound bigger by just using a dual oscillator, or you can even go up to quad, and it goes to 11 if anybody gets the reference. But you know, so, and if I turn off the filter altogether and we just listen to the waveform, so let's go back to the single, dual, quad, and 11. It's just 11 of them playing at the same time. So you get this really thick sound without having to do it 11 times. Now, if you do it 11 times with 11 different synthesizers, the sound will be much bigger even. It's like, yeah, you can create all these crazy things. So we have two ways of influencing the sound so far, which was well, no, actually only one, because we only talked about the envelope at this stage. So we have this one option so far, but there's another option that came up really quickly where people realized, oh, this note, and let me go back to the single note. This is so boring if I hold it, even if it has a nice, even if it has a nice envelope, and you know, whatever, it does this and I do this, but it's not alive at all. It's a dead sound. So people wanted to make this come more alive, so they invented another oscillator that sort of modulates the original oscillator. And it's exactly what you do when you do a vibrato. That's what you do. Because if you don't do a vibrato, the pitch is also pretty boring. I mean, it will always be exciting because of the reality and the physics, and it will always be different, and you always move it differently, and the angle, it changes. So it's an instrument is always dynamic, but you know, you make it more dynamic and control the dynamic. And so they came up with that too, and we call that LFOs, which are low frequency oscillators. So they oscillate much slower than the oscillator than we hear. And I'm just going to turn this one up and modulate the pitch. So I'll take this as a modulator. Why is it? It should be doing this like crazy. What's going on? Let's take envelope 2. Well, maybe I'm... Ah, okay. That's weird. Okay, so now I'm modulating the pitch with this low frequency oscillator. Very audible, very impractical, so to speak, the way it is now. But now if you change the speed of the right, so and then you can, of course, put another envelope on the low frequency oscillator to make it come in later. Now here in Zebra, that's done with the modulation mixer. So then that means you have one. Oh shit! Sorry, I shouldn't swear on the stream. But it keeps keeps jumping away from me. So we modulate with an envelope, and we take the what did I take? The LFO 2, right? And oh no, I have to do it this way. So this is the envelope. And let's try to get it. No, this one is. Ah, no, it's now doing it the other way around. So I have to remove this one, I think. Let me just see when it does it. So this is... I'm not doing it right. What I wanted to do is have it come in later, but I'm routing it wrong. And I'm... maybe it's this one. So if I go to envelope 2 here and remove this one. No. Okay, sorry, that didn't work. And I'm too much on the spot to just fix it now. But it is possible to sort of make the modulation come in later. I mean, you can do it also with the mod wheel. But the problem is this keyboard doesn't have a mod wheel. Otherwise, I would just put it to that. You know, I could just take the... put this to the mod wheel. Turn it up, turn this down. Set this to LFO 2 again. Is it LFO? Where did I have it? Yes. Yeah, right, so it's not doing anything now, and if I... No, that's the pitch. It doesn't have a mod. Do I have a controller here somewhere that I can quickly show this with? No, not quickly. All right. Should have taken another keyboard, but you can put it on the mod wheel where your sound will be, you know. So that's how you route it. That was the idea behind it. All right, questions before I just jump through some of the presets to show what can actually be done with this. So we can just jump through. So fillers, these are the pads, and then I just want to analyze them quickly to see what they did. So let's see what this one does. Oh, we almost had this sound earlier. Right. So you can already see down there in the MSEG, down here, that's probably controlling the filter. So now let's see what we have. So we have two oscillators in this case. And what is it doing? This one is just doing a sawtooth. And the second one also. Let's turn off the second one. And the filter. So that's the one oscillator in this patch. And the other one. So he just has 2 octaves. Cholesterol, yeah. Yeah, Howard is amazing with names and everything. So they're just an octave apart, then there's a distortion in between. Whoops. And the filter behind it. And then there's, I don't know, the noise we probably don't hear here. I don't think. Same thing, it just, organ. Let's see how he did that. So what do we have? We have an oscillator, and that is working as a pulse, actually. That's interesting. I didn't expect that. So let's remove all the other, or mute all the other. Okay, so this is just the oscillator. It's because he has the effects in here. Yeah, it's this one that's actually doing it. But this is something that's special to this synth, where he built in sort of, how should I say it? Well, effects that affect the way the waveform is created. So before the waveform is even played, it's already changed into something else. So you're not playing this pulse, but this thing creates already harmonics that are sort of sounding like registers on an organ. So, you have it very quickly. So that's the one sound. Then there's another thing called frequency modulation, oscillation, and synthesis. So that's what he uses as an attack. That's a whole other way of doing synthesis. But I can't explain it nicely now. It takes too long. But that's basically, if you go back to the 80s, there was this synthesizer called the DX7. And pretty much anything you hear from the 80s has that synthesizer and that synthesis technique. Then he mixes these two sounds. So this one is basically creating an attack for it, and then filters it. And this probably just adds dirt. Come on, turn on. Okay, what else? Then also within this you can, that's of course an arpeggiator, so you just have an arpeggiator running, but there are other things that I want to show. That's also arpeggiator. It's also, exactly, you can, every arpeggiator works differently. This one looks like this, which I don't find that intuitive. That's one of the things he needs to change for the new version. But so you set, it always goes from the root note, and you tell it how much the transposition is for the on each step, so to speak. So let's take a patch again with the. Which one did I take? What was the one? That one. All right. So here it's probably very clear. So it plays the octave, then it plays the regular pitch, and then the fifth and the seventh. So basically, if I play it by hand, but it just goes through it. And if I change these, you know, so, you know. You can make it shorter. Yeah. So so if it's just 3 steps, you know, and as I said, I mean, the interface for this one is, yeah, and they're all different in each one. But what I wanted to get to was, not this. It was this sort of thing. So I'm just holding one note, and it's a synthesizer. It's not a sample. There's nothing. It's just synth. So let's see what he does. So if we switch off. Okay, so this thing is doing. That's probably just getting the input. Yeah, that's getting the input from. So this oscillator. Okay, and let's see why it does it that way. Okay, so envelope 3 controls the volume. And envelope 2 controls the tuning. Oh yeah, that's another trick that I wanted to get into. But there's no MSEG on this one. Wow. I would have thought he did it with MSEGs. He does it with the arpeggiator this time. Yeah. Okay. It's not really what I wanted to show, but so he basically triggers every time, and then the pitch decides sort of what the parameters are, and that's why it sounds different. But I wanted to get into one thing again. So let's initialize. Where are we? It should be here, and then I have initialize. Because if you change the pitch very quickly, something unexpected happens. And you'll see, so envelope 2 should go all the way down, should be very short. So if I do this, it will create almost a bass drum, and it works better with distribute all with a sine wave. Huh? Smooth all. Come on. All smooth. And you already have a bass drum just by pitching it down very quickly. So there's no filter or anything. It's just going down really fast. Which in a way, what I showed earlier, is kind of, it's kind of similar if you think about it. If you have the resonance on the filter, that also creates self-oscillation is what we call it. So it creates an oscillator, and if you move that down, it creates sort of the same effect. That's why it sounds similar. But what I wanted to say is that some bass drums are really just created with this. If I now change the envelope of the amplifier, so the way how long we hear the sound, and we have the bass drum with just one oscillator and one envelope. I mean, I'm using 2, so it's not quite fair, but I could do it with 1 if I set it both to this one. Now the way it changes the pitch and the way it changes the amplification is the same. So it's a good thing to know. Okay, I think it makes sense to very quickly go over what Logic actually has in case you use it. There's the ES1, which is the most simple one, sort of. So this is the equivalent of one oscillator in Zebra and an envelope and a filter. But you can already see it looks much more complicated because you have to get used to what's happening. So in this case, you set the waveform here. And then this thing makes the filter dynamic. So the harder I play, the more it opens up. I'm going to just turn it down so that the instrument is not so dynamic so that we can hear what's going on. So now, oh no, that's the, here's the, no, that's the drive. Sorry, here's the filter. And I want to just show the, so you have the sawtooth again, and it has two, yeah, it has two oscillators, so you can mix them here. So this one has the oscillator. Then I wanted to get, remember I wanted to get into the pulses. So that's the pulse wave that's symmetric, and the smaller you make the pulse, so that's how the sound changes. So that's a pulse that gets smaller and smaller, sort of like, you know, this symbol here shows. Then it also has this modulation section. It has the envelope down here. All right, so I raise the attack. I can lower the sustain or turn it up, and the release is here. But it was nice to see it as a wave because it's more logical, and see a line through it. It helps. Let's see what kind of sounds you can create with this. So, because it's a cool thing too, and it's free with Logic. So. This is probably. Why does it go so slow? I don't see why it makes the envelope so slow, because it is kind of fast. Ah, it's going the other way around. I see. So it should be. No. I don't know. We'll have to analyze it correctly. Let's see what kind of pads you get out of this one. And you already know what it's doing, right? It's filtering through with a high resonance. That's why you have the feeding sound. So when you play patches now, and you hear, oh, something like this is going on, then you know, oh, I got to look for the cutoff filter, and I got to look for the resonance. And if I don't want to have as much, I just lower the resonance to get rid of the feeping. So now you can quickly, when you load up other people's patches, you can quickly understand, oh, okay, this is what I have to change to make it what I want to do. Because coming up with sounds from scratch is super fun, and you should do it. But sometimes when you need to go fast and you want inspiration, you just step through patches. Ah, funny. So this low frequency oscillator has a random value generator. So it sounds like an arpeggiator, but it's not. It's just a low oscillator that's creating random values, and you hear it. Now it's kind of cool. The problem with it is it's never the same. So if you locked into some pattern, you're not getting it back unless you recorded it as audio. Then Logic also has the ES2, which is sort of the full-blown, oh, can I get this bigger, please? The full-blown 3 oscillator version of the ES1, and it's incredibly powerful, and it also sounds very nice. Let's see, it has it has all these motions as well. I probably shouldn't play chords, so we hear. You know how it changes dynamically all the time. It's not a static sound. And this one too, sort of. So, but as you can already see, the interface, you know, it has the cutoff here. You can mix these because there are two filters here. And you sort of, I think, where is the, you set how they, if they work in parallel or if they work, you can turn this dial, but I forget where it was. How do you do this again? No, because this is the mix between the two filters that it offers. And where was that? I haven't used it in years. But you can see when I go through the presets, right here it turned because now it's probably processing the filters parallel and not after each other, one and then the other. This is it's both at the same time. So, but it again, it has a cutoff, it has a resonance, and most filters have a drive. We saw that on Ursus 2, I didn't show it. It's just raising the gain on it, but it's basically distorting it. And the second one too, so cutoff, resonance, and this one has frequency modulation. So the more you change the filter, how does it work exactly? The frequency that it's at is modulating the frequency that it's at. So it's sort of a dynamic, even more dynamic thing that it's doing. And you have the three oscillators, but I find it confusing, and the envelopes are down here, you know, attack, decay, sustain, and release. I should have probably mentioned those names at the beginning. So it's attack. I explained it, but I didn't say it. So it's attack, decay, sustain, and release. So, and you'll find that on any synthesizer, and those are the names you'll find. So if you, well, this one is so dynamic, we don't know what's going on. So if you load up a bass, and you go like, oh, I like the sound, but it's too short, I want to have it a little longer, it's probably this one. So you raise the decay. This synthesizer has one envelope that's just attack and decay without sustain and release. So it's basically just two values. I remembered that. So that's why I knew to turn this one. So you can quickly change your sound that way if you know these terms and what to look for.
Do you personally prefer like analog synthesizers and putting your hands on them, or you use a lot of?
I grew up on software synthesizers. That's why I'm not like the analog world doesn't work for me. Like I was used to the fact that if I wanted a second one, I'll just open a second one. And if I needed another envelope, I could add it because the synthesizer offered it, you know, and it's like, so I was used to that, and the hardware is, to me, it's always like, okay, yeah, I can do this one thing, but then I really need this other module to make it more fun. I mean, if you have the pre-built synthesizers, that's a different thing, like a Juno or one of these things. That's would probably be nice. But for me personally, I need to have also total recallability because I work for film. So stuff needs to be able to be recalled. I'm not creating an album and then it's done. And I always have to go back to the pieces, and they have to work, and I have to change them, and I have to make them more dynamic. And sometimes I'm creating a sound that sounds perfect by itself, but in the movie you sort of need to change something to make it work better. And if I'm working analog, then I either have to recreate that patch, which I probably forgot how to do, or take pictures, yeah. But it takes time, and so that's my problem. But of course, a lot of times I do limit myself, because that's what it basically does. If you're analog, you're limiting yourself to certain things, and it helps your creativity to be limited. If you can do everything all the time, you end up doing nothing because, well, what am I going to do? But if you limit yourself, like I limit myself a lot of times where I say, okay, on this piece, all the drums have to come from a synthesizer. I don't use any samples. I don't know, and then you start thinking, okay, how do I do a hi-hat? Or how do I create a sound that does the same thing that a hi-hat does, but is not, that thing? Or how do I create a snare drum? And by limiting yourself, you come up with other stuff that happens. And so that's a good thing. And yes, and lucky mistakes. You dial around and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. I was gonna do some percussion, but okay, I'll take the sound for something else. And then you create a new track with the instruments and you continue, and you can't do that analog either. You're always kind of stuck with that one thing. But as I said, it can be both. All right, rough overview of synthesis. I mean, Logic has many more synthesizers. It has this Alchemy thing that's hugely powerful. I don't use it much. I find it very confusing, but it does cool stuff too. I'm just loading up random things. Then it has a couple of these specific synthesizers, that are geared towards creating certain things. Like out of this one, it's hardly. Out of this one, you can't get all the sounds that you can get from others. You can get sort of similar sounds to this, because that was exactly the point, to limit it to a certain thing, so that when you call it up, okay, I can get this from that. There's one special one that I'd like to call attention to, which is the Bacille. That's also from Yuhi. And what this one does is you can cable almost everything everywhere. So that means you can use the audio rate of an oscillator and use it as a modulation for something else. So you can get much quicker modulations than you would with the low frequency oscillators, because they stop at a certain frequency, but the oscillator keeps going up. And so you can create all kinds of crazy stuff. But I'm not going to go into it. I'm just saying that this thing can do what hardware can do, because most software synthesizers, I mean, it's starting to get there because the CPUs are getting fast enough. But most software synthesizers can't modulate at the audio rate. So that's why that one was sort of special. I know you. Okay, any questions or something that I can clarify more? Or and I urge you to just go to the stations and play around with it. It's fun, and just step through the presets. It helps. It's fun to just see, oh, this, and then analyze the patch, and you'll find how things are working. It's not really that complicated. It's more complicated to learn an instrument. All right, then thank you very much, and I'll see you around.